بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المظلومين الغر الميامين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة غريب يا مظلوم كربلة. سيدي يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Avenger, the Mawla, the Imam of the time, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imam al Hussein is a university, a school, an establishment that provides not just nourishment for the soul, it can turn dust into solid gold. Imam al Hussein is such a shining bright star that if you enter its orbit, if you begin to circle around the star, if you're somehow able to find yourself within the gravitational pool of the supernova of Hussein, he can transform you from an individual who at this point, when we are first born, when we first come into this life, we're literally nothing. Not even a speck in the vastness of the cosmos. We represent nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's like a zero. A zero has no value. You can stack up all the zeros in the entire world and it's just a zero. Unless and until you put it next to the one. That's when it gains value. That is when it becomes precious. If you can enter the orbit of the solar system of Hussein, you become a star yourself. The holy messenger of Allah, listen to this beautiful hadith. When upon the birth of Imam al-Hussein, the Prophet of God, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli, tells his beloved daughter Fatima al-Zahra that this newborn son of hers is going to die at the hand of people who claim to be his followers. that Hussein is going to be massacred while all alone in the desolate desert, that Hussein is going to be killed while thirsty. Fatima al-Zahra grieves, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen cries. You've heard the story before. But then the Prophet makes a statement that relates to what I'm saying. He speaks about the companions of Imam al-Hussein, which, by the way, tonight I don't want to talk about the companions, but this is a quick reference so that you can begin to appreciate what Hussein can do, how Imam al-Hussein can transform people from specks in the vastness of the universe into the most precious gems in the world. The Prophet says to Fatima al-Zahra, he says that he will have companions who will defend him on the plains of Karbala. Hum nujum as-sama. When the Prophet says that someone is a star in the heaven, you know he means business. You know that the Prophet isn't exaggerating. This is not a poetic sort of expression. It's not a hyperbole. This is the truth and the plain truth. Hum nujum as-sama. Who? The companions of Hussein. But who are the companions of Imam al-Hussein? Were these people who had spent a lifetime in the service of Islam? Some of them were. Some of them were giants. Some of them were people who would recite the Quran overnight. Some of them would spend their nights and days in prayer and in prostration and in worship. Some of them were the likes of Habib ibn Mudahhar. Next time when you visit the shrine of Imam al-Hussein, make sure that on your way out, you also send your salutations upon Habib, Sayyidul Ansar, the master of the companions of Imam al-Hussein, who has an entire shrine dedicated to him. These placements, how the martyrs were buried in Karbala, was not a random occurrence. Imam al-Sajjad, Imam Zayn al-Abidin chose his steps very carefully. These were premeditated, pre-calculated measurements that were put in place by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Habib ibn Mudahhar is the only companion who has his own shrine, almost like a gatekeeper, like a guard to the shrine of Imam al-Hussein. Salamullah ala Habib. He was a giant. But then there were people within the camp of Imam al-Hussein who were regular individuals. They were what we'd call ordinary. They weren't special. They didn't come from a big tribe. They weren't tribal chiefs. They weren't companions who had served Islam and the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen for decades on end. Some of them were Christian who converted to Islam on the day of Ashura or a day or two prior to that. Some of them were really ordinary people, and yet they reached a station, listen to this, where Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam stands in front of their graves and he makes a proclamation, he makes a statement, and in doing so teaches us to say the same thing. Assalamu alaykum ya ahibba Allahi wa awidda'ah. Peace be upon you, O ones who are beloved to God. Habibullah is whose title again? Who is Habibullah? It's the Holy Messenger of God. And yet this title is awarded to the companions of Imam al-Hussein, to the black Turkish slave Aslam, to John, the slave of Abu Dhar, to the Christian, to the one who was Uthmani like Zuhair, to people who didn't know Imam al-Hussein until the day of Ashura. Allahu Akbar. And they're all awarded the same title as the Messenger of God. How does this happen? It happens because these tiny specks came into the orbit of the star of Hussein and in the process became stars themselves. Nujum as-sama. Imam al-Hussein has such transformative powers. And we've been talking about this over the last couple of nights. But I think this is important because we are on a journey of transformation. The reason you're here is obviously to grieve for Imam al-Hussein. It is to share the grief of Fatima al-Zahra and Rasulullah, of course. That's one of the most integral parts of this commemoration, of this commotion that happens worldwide. But part of it is, deep down, we all desire to get closer to Hussein. Part of it is, as human beings, we all desire to gain some measure of immortality. Part of it is, we'd all like to outlive our measly short lives on this earth. We'd like to be remembered. We'd like to somehow leave some kind of a legacy, leave a footprint after we leave this world. We all have this desire. It's a very natural, very human thing to want to live beyond just our date of birth and our date of death. I remember watching a documentary a while ago, and there was someone who was an avowed atheist. Like he'd say, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the afterlife. But then he said, you know what? It's good to be remembered though. And I thought to myself, if you're an atheist, and you believe that after death, you become a rotten corpse and ultimately turn into dust and ashes, what difference does it make whether someone remembers you or not? But it matters. We have a desire to be remembered. And so if we want to be remembered, and we want to be remembered in a positive way, and if we also believe in the afterlife, and we believe in paradise, and we want to achieve some measure of success in the afterlife, then we need to enter the orbit of Hussein. We need to connect with Imam al-Hussein, because Imam al-Hussein is so great that the ziyarah says طَهُرْتَ وَطَهُرَتْ بِكَ الْبِلَادِ. Imam al-Hussein is so pure that anything that comes in contact with him becomes pure. It is purified. Allahu Akbar. Those of you who have been to Ziyarat al-Arba'in know exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you who are Iraqi, and as an Iraqi I think I get to say this, Iraqis have a very rough attitude. For the most part, of course, we don't want to generalize, we don't want to stereotype, but generally speaking, decades and decades and even centuries of persecution and oppression have roughened up the Iraqi psyche. They're quick-tempered, they're very difficult to please, they get angry easily. And yet, anyone who's ever stepped into the plains of Karbala during Ziyarat al-Arba'in will attest that these same Iraqis will turn into angelic beings. Their generosity, their compassion, their love, their unconditional love towards random strangers. I have seen Christians convert thanks to the generosity they see by Iraqis. I've seen people who had nothing to do with religion, but because they did ziyarah and the kindness that they see from these villagers and these elderly men, women, children, the sacrifices they make all year long so that they could serve the pilgrims of Imam al-Hussein. طَهُرْتَ وَطَهُرَتْ بِكَ الْبِلَادِ. This is Imam al-Hussein cleansing everyone. Imam al-Hussein doing something to people, turning them into celestial, immortal angels, not human beings. And by the way, that is just a glimpse of what we could all expect upon the reappearance of our master, the holy Imam, who will also, traditions say this, he will place his hands on the head of his followers and completely transform them. They will turn into angelic beings. They will turn into the most beautiful souls. Of course, they would have to have strived in order to get to that station. But once you do, once you get to that final frontier, where you are in the presence of Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, arwahuna liturab maqdamih al-fida, the Imam, all he has to do is place his hand. This is the son of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. This is the warith, the inheritor, the heir of Imam al-Hussein, who will place his blessed tender hand on your head and cleanse you of any trace of animalistic tendencies. Cleanse you from what bogs you down, what brings you down toward the earth, and gives you the ability to fly off into the celestial realm and turn this world into a paradise on earth. Insha'Allah, we live to see that day. Now, this is what Imam al-Hussein is able to do. Connect with him. Connect with him. Again, we're not talking about some kind of substitutionary atonement. Don't confuse this with other ideologies. That, oh, Imam al-Hussein, you come to his majlis and you're all set. It's a get out of jail free card. I don't know who needs to hear this, how many times we've had to say this, but I'll say it again. That's not what I'm talking about. What we are saying is Imam al-Hussein has the power to change you. So connect with him and change. Connect with him, make the commitment, make the decision to actually be a better person, to join and enlist in the camp of Imam al-Hussein. Because his call continues to echo to this very day. ألا هل من ناصر ينصرنا لوجه الله. Is there no one to support us for the sake of Allah? And that's why Imam al-Rida says that whenever you remember Imam al-Hussein and remember his companions, you should say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza fawzan azima. The Imam says, the moment you say that, God will give you the reward of one as though you were killed on the plains of Karbala defending Imam al-Hussein. So say it with me. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza fawzan azima. Ya Abu Abdullah. Imam al-Hussein did something on the plains of Karbala that was nothing short of miraculous. Just today I was saying that, think about Hur. Hur, had he followed the inevitable conclusion of his actions and his lifestyle prior to the day of Ashura, should have now been cursed by everyone. Had Hur given into peer pressure, social impact that dictates, according to Darwinian sociology, according to the prevalent conventional wisdom of today, that Hur is the product of his circumstances. Anyone is a product of his circumstances. You grow up in a mob family, you turn into what? An angel? You turn into a mobster. Had Hur given into that lie that you can't change, that you can't help it, that you are who you are, people don't change, all this garbage that you hear from popular media at school and elsewhere, Hur would have been cursed today alongside Yazid, Umar ibn Sa'ad, Shamr, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. But he was free, which is why Imam Hussein told him, Anta hurrun kama sammatka ummuk. You are truly a free man. You broke those chains, those common misconceptions, those prevalent ideas and views, that zeitgeist that tells you that you can't help it. You really can't. You have this desire, there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to go with the flow. But Hur was free, and he proved to all of us that you can change, right? Now, this is what's amazing, and I want to draw your attention to this. Hur had about half a day to make the decision on whether or not he should switch sides to the camp of Imam al-Hussein. And half a day is a very short time. Again, for someone to come from that background, I mean, he was the commander of the army that first intercepted the camp of Imam al-Hussein and blocked their access to their final destination. And Ibn Ziyad was not going to appoint a commander who's weak, who's going to have any kind of sympathy for Imam al-Hussein. So his background must have been one of treachery and treason and death and murder. I don't know what he did in his past life. But what we do know is that someone does not take that position unless they are complete sellouts. And so the half a day from the morning of Ashura, when he went to Umar ibn Sa'ad and he said to him, أَمُقَاتِلٌ أَنْتَ هَذَا الرَّجُلُ? Are you actually going to fight this man? Umar ibn Sa'ad said, Na'am wallah, yes by God. He swears by God. This filthy, disbelieving killer and monster swears in God's name. You got to keep up appearances, right? Na'am wallah, qitalun. We're going to fight him such a fight that the least you will see is heads rolling on the ground. When Hur realized what was going on and what he was being entrapped with, he begins this internal struggle. What do I do? Where do I go? He sees two camps. At the very end, his friend says, I saw him shivering and shaking. He says to him, why are you shaking? Hur? You? Is that you? If someone asked me who the bravest person in Kufa is, I would never skip you. You'd be at the top of that list. And you're shaking? You're shivering? I mean, after all, it's a camp of about 120 people and a bunch of kids and women. We got 30,000 men armed to the teeth. So what are you afraid of? He said, that's not it. That's not it. I see two camps. On the one hand, I see a camp that guarantees my life on this earth in comfort, in peace. I'll probably be rewarded when I go back. I'll probably get an increase in my rank. It's a comfortable life. It promises me a comfortable life. However, it is a surefire way to enter the inferno and the deepest recesses of the fires of hell. There's no question about it. This is the grandson of Rasulullah we're talking about. I don't know what blinders you have on, but this is Hussein ibn Ali. So I'm definitely going to go to hell, but I will live a comfortable life. On the other hand, if I take the blue pill, here's what's going to happen. I know for a fact that I will be murdered, I will be killed, I will be dismembered, my head will be chopped off. But at the end of that journey, all that separates me from entering paradise is this afternoon. And so, put yourself in that position, brothers and sisters. What happens is that internal struggle turns into a physical manifestation. He begins to shake. And so, when he makes up his mind, he starts to head towards the camp of Imam al-Hussein. He reaches the camp with his head lowered. Imam al-Hussein says to him, "Irfa' ra'sak." Raise your head high, which has two meanings. One, raise your head so I can see who you are. Who are you? You've come from the enemy camp. The second meaning is, Hur, you have now achieved righteousness. Raise your head high. Be a proud man that you were able to be the free man who defeated his desires and his ego and all the forces in the world that were acting against this very move. Raise your head high. Be proud of yourself. Last night somebody asked me, how can we get rid of bad habits? And I said, well, punish yourself. Punish yourself if you do something bad. Fast for a day or two. Give some charity. But on the other hand, if you do something good, reward yourself. There's nothing wrong maybe getting yourself an ice cream if you wake up for Fajr on time that day. There's nothing wrong in getting yourself something that's nice and halal, right? Reward yourself. Reward yourself. And if you can somehow connect those rewards with religiously sanctioned activities, go to ziyarah. If you find yourself to have been a good person, good to your parents, for example, go to ziyarah that year. Spoil yourself with hajj and umrah and ziyarah and those good things, right? Raise your head high, be proud. So Hur joins Imam al-Hussein. His brother was also in the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd. Now, it's not that tribalism made his brother rethink his position. It's not that, for sure. Why? Because he's literally going to the side that's going to be crushed. And so no tribal tendencies or sentiments can outweigh being killed. So it wasn't that. It's just that sometimes, brothers and sisters, we could use a good role model, right? You could really be a good role model for your friends, for your siblings, your family members, right? Do the right thing so that they can see you doing it. This isn't boasting, this isn't riyah, this isn't being ostentatious. This is actually you providing a good example for other people to follow. That is why sadaqatul alan is recommended in and of itself, according to the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you give charity in public, you get rewarded for that. Why? Because you encourage others to follow suit. So his brother is inspired by Hur to do the same thing. But now all eyes are on him. So he can't just walk towards the camp of Imam al-Hussein. They'll grab him, they'll kill him. So he had to get creative. What does he do? He goes up to Umar ibn Sa'd. He says, Ya Amir, Hur, my brother, has disgraced us. He has brought shame to my family's name, to my tribe, and I want to be the one to avenge that. He unsheathes his sword. He says, let me go kill him. He says, sure, go make an example of your brother. So he heads towards his brother. Everyone's expecting that he's going to come back with his head. As soon as he reaches his brother, throws the sword down, embraces him, and joins the camp of Imam al-Hussein. Now listen to this. Hur had half a day to make that decision. His brother only had a few minutes to orchestrate this new plan and to become creative. But then there were other people. Again, this is the power of Hussein, brothers and sisters. This is the magnetism of Hussein. This is the strength of Hussein. إِنَّ الْحُسَيْنِ فِي السَّمَاءِ أَكْبَرَ مِنْهُ فِي الْأَرَضِينَ. The Holy Prophet says Hussein is in the heavens, much bigger, much greater than what you see in this world. Ziyaratul Arba'een is much smaller than what Imam al-Hussein does to your hearts, to the hearts of millions and billions of people. So these two have already made the switch. The slave of Hur was also in the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd. Now his master is gone, his brother is gone, and he's run out of ideas. There's nothing he can do to be granted permission to go. So what he does is, within the few seconds that he had to come up with some kind of a plan, he simply pulls out his sword and begins to fight those around him. Within a few seconds, he's outnumbered by an army of 30,000 and devoured and killed. But in doing so, he becomes the first martyr of Karbala. نجوم السماء السلام عليكم يا أحباء الله وأوداءه بأبي أنتم وأمي. Imam al-Sadiq says to the companions of Imam al-Hussein, may my parents be sacrificed for you. Now, I want to take you somewhere else. On the subject of reforming ourselves, getting into the orbit of Imam al-Hussein. Every single scene in the saga of Karbala has the same power. Every single moment. And my recommendation and my suggestion to all of you is, again, don't just be content with what you hear from the sacred minbar of Imam al-Hussein. Pick up a book. There is a maqtal. Maqtal means the account, the narrative of the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi has an incredible maqtal. I don't know if it's been translated into English, but if it is, that should be your top choice. As-Sayyid ibn Tawus has an incredible maqtal, al-Luhuf, that is translated into English. Pick it up, read it from beginning to end. Right? Others, al-Muharram, have also written maqatil. Pick up a book because each page has the power to do the same thing. It has the power to transform you and turn you into an angelic being. For example, Imam al-Hussein recites a verse of the Quran. And this I want to make the theme of tonight's talk, inshallah. There's a verse that Imam al-Hussein recites, and the verse is this. It is in Surah Al-Kahf. The Imam says, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّ أَصْحَابَ الْكَهْفِ وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. So I want to give you some context to this verse. The verse is found in Surah Al-Kahf. You've all heard of the people of the cave, right? I'm sure at some point, the people of the cave, the believers who were Christian and they were being persecuted by the tyrant king at the time, who decided to flee, and they went into a cave, and you've all heard the story. However, this verse talks about two groups of people. Allah says, do you perceive that the people of the cave and Raqim were among the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They were among the strangest of signs. What God is saying to the Prophet and to Muslims is that these two signs, a sign is what? It is what leads you to something, right? A road sign leads you to a road. A sign in the Quran is something that leads you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has lessons, it has morals, it has things in it that would revive your soul and turn you to Allah. So God says, do you think that the people of the cave, meaning the story of the people of the cave, and Raqim were among our strangest signs, meaning that God has stranger signs than Kahf and Raqim, meaning that the creation of the heavens and the earth is stranger than the people of the cave and Raqim, right? That's basically what Allah is trying to say. The question is this: we've all heard about Ashab al-Kahf. Who are al-Raqim? Ashab al-Raqim, who are they? If you haven't heard the story, I will convey it to you. The hadith is narrated in a book called Al-Mahasin by a scholar by the name of Al-Burqi. He narrates the hadith with a connected chain of narrations all the way back to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The Holy Messenger says, listen carefully, he says one day there were 3 friends who went out into the desert, and they went on an expedition, on an excursion, call it what you want. So they went and climbed a mountain and saw a cave. So they went inside the cave in order to pray. So this tells you that these people were somewhat good people, right? By the way, I have this thing where, I don't know if you want to call it a hobby, a fetish, or whatever it is, but something I always like to do when I go to far-flung places, I always like to find a place and think to myself, I hope I'm the first person ever to pray in this spot, right? Because we have a tradition that says every spot you pray on the Day of Judgment, it'll bear witness to you that, oh God, this person prayed on this spot. So these people saw this cave and they're like, let's go inside and pray. When they enter the cave, there's a bit of an earthquake, and a big rock falls down from the summit of the mountain and blocks the entrance of the cave, so much so that there was no longer any light coming in. The Holy Prophet says that these 3 friends, they were obviously terrified. We're stuck in a cave, in a mountain, no one knows where we are, there is no cell reception, I'm sure, and the entry of the cave is blocked by a giant rock. One of them says to the other, he was a smart man, he says, you know what, brothers, this is because of our sins. We have a hadith, by the way, that if you so much as slip and fall down, that is because of a sin that you've committed. And I explained on the first night why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala usually makes good people suffer more than others. So he says to his friends that this is because of our sins. And I can think of only one way we can get out of this. They said, what? He said, we should all think of one really good deed that we've performed, a pure act done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else, where you know for a fact that it was a sin perhaps that you could have avoided, you could have done, and no one would have found you, no one would have caught you, but you didn't do it anyway. Let's all try and find something we've done and ask Allah in the name of that act to rescue us, to relieve us. The first person says, he says, there is one thing I did once purely for the sake of Allah. They said, what? He said, well, there was this really beautiful woman who was the talk of the town. Everyone knew she was a celebrity, a model, if you like. And so I wanted to satisfy my desire with her. I wanted her. And so I reached out to her and she said, not unless you pay me a big sum of money. And of course it would have been haram, but I said to myself, I can do it. So I started saving. And I saved and I saved and I saved, and after a long while, I had enough money to offer this wicked, evil woman so that I could satisfy my desire with her. And I went all the way to the very last line. حتى جلست منها مجلس الرجل من المرأة He says, at the very last second, I thought to myself, this is wrong. This isn't right. This is fornication. This is haram. What am I doing? What was I thinking? So I left her and the money. I didn't even ask her for the money back, which I'd been saving up for a long time. And I said to myself, I will not do this. By the way, brothers and sisters, this is a really, I mean, it's much easier said than done, right? When we leave any two people together for a sufficient amount of time, out of 100 couples, 1,000 couples, how many do you think will actually abandon the act if it's haram? Traditions tell us that if a man and a woman are left alone in a confined space, the third person to join them will always be the devil himself. Because the devil plays with our heads and makes us want to do things, and those desires will eventually turn into a fire, and the fire will manifest itself in the act itself. So he says that at the very last second, when desires are running high, when the expectations are high, when all of this time we've been building up to this moment, I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. It's haram. The minute he said that, the Prophet says that there was a bit of an earthquake, another aftershock if you like, and the rock moved just a bit in a sign that relief was coming. The rock that was blocking their cave. The second person said, I also have a story. And my story is this. He says, one day I hired a bunch of farmers to harvest a very large land that I had. And so I brought these guys and I told them that for a day's work, I will give you half a dirham, meaning half a silver coin, each one. So it says they worked from the morning until the night. Imagine it's a big land and they're trying to harvest and plant it. He says, when I went to pay their wages, I paid each one, as agreed, half a coin. When I got to the last person, he said, I worked as hard as two people. So I want you to give me 1 dirham instead of just half a dirham. He said, but we had an agreement. I told you I would give you half a dirham. So the laborer, that poor peasant, said, you know what? Forget it. And he left and did not take half the dirham which he was owed. He left and came back 2 years later. He says, when he came back 2 years later, what I did with that money, the half a dirham that I had, was I took it and I bought a bunch of seeds. Then I took those seeds and I planted them in the land. When that guy came back and asked for his half a dirham, I realized that this entire farm belongs to him. Because it was his money that was used to buy the seeds, and the seeds that have now grown into these trees with fruits and everything. So I said to him, this entire farm belongs to you. And it was, the Prophet says, 13,000 dirhams worth. It was half a dirham, now it's 13,000. In other words, he says, Ya Allah, I could have just given him the half a dirham that I owed him. No one would have known, would have blamed me. Right? But I decided to give it all to him because it actually belonged to him. When he said that, the rock moved just a little bit more, that at this point, there was a little bit of light, a shimmer that came into the cave, and they began to be able to see each other, the Prophet says. Then the third person came. Listen. The third person says, I also once did something for the sake of Allah, purely. They said, what? He said, well, I have my family. And I also have my parents who are old, who live in a separate accommodation. Every night when I get back from work, because my parents are so old, they're immobile. They can't get out of the house, they can't work, they can't provide for themselves. So before I go to my family, I visit my parents and I bring them some food. Every single day they expect me to show up with their food. He says, one day I was delayed at work. So when I got to my parents' homes, I had a bowl of milk, which was their dinner, and I showed up. Because it was late, they were both asleep. So now I have a few options. Option number one is I could just go home and come back in the morning. But what if they wake up in the middle of the night? They were waiting for me, they're hungry. So that's out of the question. Option number two is to leave the milk right there, and whenever they wake up, they can have it. But he says, I was afraid that a rodent, a mouse, an animal or something would come and take it. So that was out of the question. The other option was that I would simply wait until they woke up. He says, so I waited there and waited and waited and waited until they woke up in the morning while I was holding the bowl of milk. When they woke up, I gave it to them. The Holy Prophet says, when he said those words, there was an aftershock and the entire rock moved from the entrance of the cave, and they were now able to walk out. Then the Prophet says, Man sadaqa Allah najah. Whoever is truthful with Allah, whoever is sincere with God, whoever does something purely for the sake of God, God will rescue him, God will help him. That's one story. Ashabul Kahfi wal Raqim. Again, we're trying to connect all of this to Imam al-Hussein later on. Because I said, remember, Imam al-Hussein recited this verse. I will wrap up with this without taking too much of your time. There is a dua in Mafatih al-Jinan, which I think you've all heard of. It's called Dua Mashlul. Who's heard of that dua? Many people have. Do you know the backstory for this dua? It's incredible. One day, Imam al-Hussein, Ruhi Fidah, Salawatullahi alayh, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Imam al-Hussein says, I was in Masjid al-Haram on a very dark and starless night, right? There was no light, it was very dark. He says, my father and I were doing tawaf. And as we were performing tawaf, the mataf became empty, meaning the space where people perform the circumambulation, it became empty, it was dark, it was probably cold, so people went to sleep. He said, it was just me and my father who remained, when in the middle of the night we heard someone moan. We heard someone making sounds of pain and anguish and grief. He says, my father told me, Ya Aba Abdullah, atasma'u hada as-sawt? Do you hear that? He says, yes, my father, I hear it. He said, go and find out where this voice is coming from. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Aba al-Aytam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, always looking for people who need help. He said, go find out where this is coming from. Imam al-Hussein says, I went and I looked around until I found a person praying to Allah in front of the Kaaba. And while he was praying, he says, I heard him recite verses of poetry. And in those verses, essentially in a nutshell, what he was saying was, oh Allah, relieve the one who is sinful. Oh Allah, forgive the one who has acted wrongfully against his parents. Oh Allah, I have been sinful, I have transgressed your laws, please forgive me. Imam al-Hussein said, I told that man, Ajib Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen is asking for you, go. He says, but because he was praying, he waited until he finished his prayer, and then he said to Imam al-Hussein, show me to where I'm supposed to go. Then he followed Imam al-Hussein to Amir al-Mu'mineen. The Imam said to him, what is wrong with you? He looked at him, and half of his body was paralyzed. The other half was okay, but the other half was completely disabled. The Imam said, what happened to you? He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I have a father. This father was really kind, he was really good, he cared for me. But I was an immoral person. I spent my nights drinking and gambling and clubbing and doing all the filthy, sinful things that you can imagine. And every once in a while, my father would come to me and say, my son, don't do this. This is wrong. The path you've chosen is one that's going to lead you to your self-destruction. And he would advise me and he would admonish me, but I wouldn't listen to him. He says, until one day I wanted to go and grab some money from the safe or a box or something that they had. He said, I went to grab this money so that I could go out and party and have fun. He said, my father came and obstructed my path. My father said to me, don't do this, this is wrong. Again, in his manner of trying to admonish me, he tried to stop me, so I grabbed his hand, twisted his arm, and he fell face first to the ground. When my father fell, this young man says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says he tried to get up, but he was in so much pain that he couldn't even stand back up. At that moment, while he was lying on the ground, He said, "Oh Allah, I ask you in the name of the Kaaba, your house, that you punish my son for mistreating me the way he has so far." He said, the moment he said that, before even finishing the sentence, half of my body became paralyzed. And so I became known in my community as the man who, man ukhidha bidu'a'i abih, the one whose father has cursed. And because of his father's curse, this is where he is right now. So then he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, I begged my father to take back that prayer. And I say this to the younger brothers and sisters here. Make sure your parents never are forced into a position where they would make a prayer like that. Make sure that you get them to pray for your prosperity and for your happiness, not the other way around. Na'udhu billah. He says, I begged my father, please undo this. Please pray for my healing and my cure. But my father wouldn't do it. He said, I did it for 3 years. After 3 years, I convinced him. And I said to him, let's go to the Kaaba because you prayed in the name of the Kaaba. Let's go to Mecca so that you would pray for me and I'd find my relief. On the way to Mecca, his mule or the camel he was riding on tripped, he fell down and died. And here I am today without any means of finding my healing. Amir al-Mu'mineen said to him, Ta'al, ilayya. You seem like a sincere young man. You seem like you have repented to Allah. You seem like you have changed your old ways. Come, I will share something with you. It is a secret that I have received from Rasulullah Habibi. And I will share the secret with you. The secret is what? Dua mashlul. Brothers and sisters, now that you know the backstory, ensure that you read the dua for your needs and your wishes, inshaAllah. The Imam then began to list the merits of this dua. He said to him that this dua, the Holy Messenger of God, my beloved sweetheart, told me that this dua contains Ismullah al-A'zam. This dua is a relief for anyone who prays to God with it. This dua is this dua is that. Imam al-Hussein says, فَكَانَ فَرَحِي بِفَوَائِدِ هَذَا الدُّعَاء. My delight at the beauty of this dua was greater, and at learning about this dua was greater than the young man eventually finding his cure from his illness. Amir al-Mu'mineen told him that if you read this dua, you will then see Rasulullah in your dream and the Prophet will heal you. Now, I mentioned Ashab al-Raqim and I mentioned the verse in the Quran. This verse was recited by Imam al-Hussein, but where? It was recited as the severed head of Aba Abdullah was on a long spear being transported from one place to another. So Imam al-Hussein's severed head would recite the Quran on top of the spear. أم عجبت أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. Meaning, you think that the people of the cave story was strange. You think that the story of Ar-Raqim was strange. Do you know what is even stranger? It is the severed head of Aba Abdullah reciting the Quran from the top of the spear. Brothers and sisters, you must have heard about the Christian monk who came across the caravan carrying the heads of the martyrs. This man he comes out of his house one day, he sees a caravan with severed heads, spears, swords, shields. He walks up to these people. He looks up and he sees a head that was truly special. There was something about the head of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein reciting the Quran. So he says, who is the commander of this contingent, of this army? They said to him, this is the commander. So he went and grabbed all of his life savings, which were 15,000 dirhams. He went to that man. He said, take this money. Just let me hold this head for one night as you rest. Let me have it. Allahu Akbar. So he gave him the head. He took that head. He went inside his house and he spent the night with the severed head of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. But how? Historians say that he took the head of the Imam, as soon as he grabbed the head, he began wiping it, cleaning it, removing the blood. So he heard a call from the heavens, may God bless the one who keeps the sanctity of Aba Abdullah. He said, oh Allah, oh God, where is this voice coming from? There was no response. So then he said, I ask you, O severed head, I just heard you recite something. I ask you in the name of Jesus, my Lord and Master, to tell me who you are. So the lips of Aba Abdullah began moving. Ana ibn binti Rasulullah. أنا المذبوح عطشانا. I am the one who was slaughtered while thirsty. He's a Christian man, he's not even a Muslim. He cried and cried, then he placed his cheek against the cheek of Aba Abdullah, and he made a prayer that we all wish we could get. He said to him, whoever you are, I beg you to intercede for me on the day of judgment. Aba Abdullah then told him, you have to return to the religion of my grandfather Rasulullah. So the man immediately said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And Aba Abdullah promised to give him his intercession. Now I say this to you, brothers and sisters, a Christian monk sees the head of the Imam and he's completely transformed. What happened to Imam al-Hussein's 3-year-old daughter Ruqayya? What happened to this young girl who for an entire month she didn't see Aba Abdullah al-Hussein? Do you know why? For 2 reasons. She didn't know what had happened to him. The first reason was that they actually took the severed heads on a different route. They didn't come with the women and the children. But the second reason is, every time she asked for her father, they would beat her. They would whip her. Every time she would say, Abatah, Abatah, they would come to her. Those savage animals would beat up a 3-year-old orphan. Let's say that these came from a different religion. Let us assume the lie that they fabricated, that these are Khawarij, these are non-Muslims, was true. In what religion do you beat up a 3-year-old orphan? I don't know. And so she didn't know what had happened to her father. She had no idea. This whole time she would only have one person to speak with, and that was her aunt Zainab. Amma Zainab, ayna walidi? Where is my father? Last thing I heard was my father saying, Al-Atash wa haqq jaddi Rasulullah ana atsha. Last thing I heard was my father saying, feed me some water before you kill me. But I never saw him again after that. She's only 3 years old. I don't know, as fathers and mothers, if you have a 3-year-old daughter, have you ever seen the attachment she has with her father? Have you seen how she tries everything to please him? She comes up to the father, tells him stories, tries to endear herself. And yet we have the 3-year-old Ruqayya. Ruqayya. Her name breaks every heart. And so for an entire month, she hasn't seen her father. This whole time, she has so many stories to share with him. She has so many things to tell him. Like, for example, how every time she couldn't walk fast enough, they would come and beat up her Aunt Zainab. How in a span of 1 month, I don't know. Is it even possible that the 3-year-old's hair would turn gray? Allahu Akbar. She has so many stories to share about her brother Zain al-Abidin, and how despite his illness, he has the thickest chain around his neck and there's blood gushing from underneath it. She has so many stories, and she has so many questions as well. Like, for example, my father, where is my brother Ali al-Asghar? You were the last person to see him. You came and took him to the enemy camp. You said you were going to feed him. You were going to quench his thirst. And we were waiting that maybe you could bring back some water to our camp. What happened to him? He never came back. She has so many things to say to her father. And this whole time, she did not sleep for a single night. How could she sleep? She was being dragged from town to town. They're beating every day. She didn't sleep until this final night. Allahu Akbar. In that sleep of hers, for the first time, she sees her father. Her wish is granted. Her father comes to her dream. She speaks with him. She wakes up. As soon as she wakes up, she has nothing to say, nothing to ask. Abata, Abata. I want my father. I want my father. Now imagine the entire camp, all these women and children, they're all grieving, they're all bereaved, they're all crying. But when they hear the 3-year-old orphan ask for her father, everyone starts to weep again. Everyone cries out loud again. The evil tyrant is sleeping in his bed right next door. His sleep is disturbed. He wakes up. He says, "What is that noise?" They say to him, "It is the 3-year-old daughter of Hussein. She woke up in the middle of the night." What does she want? She wants her father. Oh, I'll give her her father. I'll show her. She dares wake me up from my sleep. Take her father to her. They come inside the camp. They didn't just come bearing fruits. They entered the camp. They started beating everyone up once again. Wake up, you dare wake up the king. They all wake up. Allahu Akbar. They approach Ruqayya. They're holding a bowl that is covered with a white cloth. Ruqayya says, "Ya Amma, I never asked for water. I want my father." They said, "What you want is inside this bowl." I don't know if you've seen stories of these orphans in Iraq from the Hashd al-Sha'bi and others, how when they see their father's picture, have you seen what happens to them? Have you seen what happens to them when they see the casket, when they see the coffin, when their father's brought out? They didn't give a picture to Ruqayya, they gave her her father's severed head. A girl wants to sleep in her father's lap all the time, and yet this is her father's head in her lap. من الذي أيتمني على صغر سني. Father, now that I have you, I have some questions for you. Who orphaned me at this age, oh Father? Aba Abdullah. This 3-year-old brothers and sisters, despite her tiny hands, she can untie the biggest knots. If you have prayers, if you have wishes, if you want Imam al-Zaman to reappear, if you want your young ones to remain on the path of the Ahlul Bayt, ask in the name of Ruqayya. Imam al-Hussein will never say no. Ask him in the name of his 3-year-old orphan. She looks at her father's face. She says, "Abata, who wounded your forehead? من الذي خضب الشيب العفيف." Your beard was gray and black. Why is it dyed with red? She speaks with Abu Abdullah al-Hussein in her tiny young tongue for a few moments. Everyone around her is weeping, crying, when all of a sudden she falls quiet. Everyone says, well, she must have been tired. She went to sleep. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, Amma Zaynab, that is my sister. She has just joined our father, Hussein. Hazim, Hazim, Wallah Hazim. ناصر من ذريتهم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. I want you to read this dua while you're still crying for Imam Hussein's 3-year-old orphan Ruqayya. While you're still crying, make this dua. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه فيها طويلا. اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاءه وعونه ورضاه ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك يا كريم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Many people have asked us for du'as, for prayers, for their loved ones, those who are sick, those who are not in the best of their health tonight. Let us all recite this verse for their healing, inshaAllah. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 اللهم اشف مرضانا. اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم تقبل أعمالنا. اللهم وارحم موتانا. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ومن مات على ولاية أمير المؤمنين والعلماء والصالحين والشهداء وخدمة أبي عبد الله الحسين نهدي لهم ثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.